So, in preparation for the Browns having a new head coach for the first time since the 2020 season, people have been looking up and researching more and more about the new head coach of the Cleveland Browns, Todd Monken. And I'll admit, man, this guy is more interesting than I think people gave him credit for. He seems like a pretty he seems like a different demeanor than Kevin. Like he's not like super emotional. And that's kind of similar to Kevin, but he does seem to be a little bit more. He wears more of what he's feeling on his sleeves. He's not like, again, he's not going to be on the sidelines melting down, but he's a straight shooter. It looks like he seems like somebody who has no problem just telling you what he feels. And we know with Kevin was very, very guarded with how he felt and what he felt, almost to a point of frustration. So we're seeing these clips of Todd Monken, right? There's a very funny one of him. He's talking about let's go effing beat their effing asses like before walking into the stadium, and he's talking to Raven fans. That seems pretty cool. The Browns fans are gonna appreciate stuff like that. But also, there's this clip of Todd Monken talking about what he wants at the quarterback position. And again, I think the big difference between him and Kevin Stefanski is Kevin is guarded and secretive, almost like to the point to where it like is annoying, right? I've talked about this before where head coaches think that they're guarding secrets to war like at times, and they're just really guarding the same mesh play they run the last game like 8 times. But anyways, Todd Monken had this clip surface where he's talking about what he wants in a quarterback. I'm going to let that clip play out, and then we're going to react to it.
All right, athletic QB, off schedule. No chance in the world, if you want to be explosive, you want a statured quarterback. You don't. Now, there's a fine line, right? Get a guy that just runs, and then it's like, all right, when we have to throw, you're always trying to find that balance. You still have to be able to throw it. But you want to be explosive, guys that can use their feet and get you out of trouble. Because, as I always tell the offense, we did a study all the way back at Tampa, Jameis Winston, and it's every year, our number one pass play has always been scramble. We will not call another play that happens more than scramble. I don't care if we call both seam, we call pit, we call a naked, don't make it happens at least 5 times a game, 17 games, what is that, 85 times a year. That's scramble. You're scrambling. It happened today. We had a few plays happen today. We had one in the red zone. I don't know if it would have been completed. Don't make it. It's going to come up. You're going to get moved. You have an athletic quarterback. We studied the hell out of Russell Wilson. If you studied Russell Wilson and you really looked at it, you weren't looking at spacing. You weren't looking at concepts. You were looking at shots and him running around and making a play. And they were elite at scramble drill. They just were. So you want to be explosive, you have to fight like that guy's a really good thrower. But you know what? If he's a 5'1", not real athletic, you know how good you have to be at running back? You know how good you have to be at wideout? You know how good you got to be at every position? Nothing's more frustrating from a defensive perspective than a guy running around. It breaks down your coverage. Like, well, just trying to plaster and guys moving and all that, and you're like, God damn, that's frustrating as hell. And then when they're really good at scramble and they make an elite play, and you're like, God damn, we practiced the hell out of that. That's good. That's what happens when you're a coach. Like, God damn, we practiced that, and it showed up on tape. But that type of stuff, you got to work it. You got to look to recruit that guy or have him. Perimeter plays.
So I thought that was incredibly interesting. One, I appreciate, again, he's just willing to say what he wants at quarterback, right? He's talking about, in that clip, a lot of the best plays we have, the best passing plays we have, are scrambles, and I think also what's kind of in the subtext of what he's saying is it's okay to improvise in my offense. And I think this is going to be something that dramatically changes what you're going to look for in a quarterback for the Browns going forward, as long as Todd Monken is the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. because you go from the Stefanski style, the split of the Kubiak system that Stefanski was a part of. And that is not a style of offense that really works well for guys who improvise, for guys who like to scramble. It can work. It's been done before. Obviously, the West Coast offense is like the OG of that Kubiak system, and Joe Montana, right? Steve Young put up big numbers improvising off schedule, making plays at times. So it's not like it's impossible to do, but it is a more strict system that requires being on time. And that's not to say that Todd Monken's offense is going to be some kind of loosey-goosey offense that you don't ever have to be on time for, and it's going to be all improvisation, but it does invite it more than what Stefanski did. I think it invites more explosives and going downfield and trying to hunt for stuff. I don't know who's going to stay or go, because a lot of that's going to be determined by what Todd Monken wants to deal with in that quarterback room. He might like Shedor's skill set, but not like where Shedor is in his progress as a player, or not like what comes with Shedor and decide he's out on that, right? The same thing, like he might look at a Dylan Gabriel and say, oh, I don't really like your skill set, but I do like what you bring to the table mentally, right? Like there's a lot of things that can factor in to who he keeps and who he doesn't keep. But if we're just using that clip as a reference, and that's a 3-minute clip, it's not Todd Monken's entire personality, right? So we got to be careful with how much we really extrapolate from it. But if we play that game and we look at that clip and we watch that clip and we ask ourselves, who on the quarterback roster right now fits more of the mold? Shedor fits the mold of, well, not the mold, but more of the mold than like Dylan Gabriel, right? Dylan Gabriel is not a great improviser. Dylan Gabriel is not an explosive athlete. And Dylan Gabriel, not really a great scrambler. What Dylan Gabriel can do well is operate a complex offense and be on time, or at least theoretically, that's what you think he can do well. He has not done that at a pro level in regular season games, but that's what the hope is for Dylan as a prospect. Shedor is always going to require some level of improvisation in order to be successful in the league. And I do think Todd Monken can offer him more of a platform to be successful than maybe the Kubiak style offense that Kevin ran provided for Shedor. That being said, because Monken is okay with you being a little bit more risky with the football, that also means that there are less safeguards in place. So while you might think, well, Shedor improvises and Shedor gets out there and Shedor can scramble and that fits what Monken wants to do, Todd Monken might be thinking to himself, yeah, but I don't trust him without those guardrails out there. And that might be something that he's totally out on. Because when you run that Todd Monken system and you have somebody out there that's not really great at making decisions, it turns into a lot of interceptions, right? 2019 Baker Mayfield, even though it was a truncated version of that offense, there were a ton of interceptions that year for Baker. Jameis Winston, ton of interceptions there. So there's a flip side to that, right? He might look at Shedor and say, oh, he can improvise and he's willing to be risky downfield and all of that. And that he's going to maybe add some value to the quarterback room like that, right? It's easy to kind of make that assumption, but also you got to think about what the downsides to Shedor in the offense that's going to have less control is, and that's going to be interceptions, because he threw a lot of bad interceptions this year with with the handcuffs on, right? With the guardrails there. If there's no guardrail there, you're relying on a lot of improvement to happen between now and the start of next season for that not to turn into a disaster as far as interception numbers are concerned. So that's the in-house options, right? Shador, Dylan Gabriel. You can talk about Deshaun Watson, but I got to make sure Deshaun Watson's body isn't cooked before I have any serious conversation about him, because we're not talking about somebody who we've seen recently. We're talking about somebody we haven't seen in over a calendar year. We're talking about 400 plus days. He's about to have a hiatus as long as his first hiatus from football, when he had to transition from the Texans to the Browns. So we don't know what Deshaun Watson is. There's no frame of reference to tell where he is. He has had 2 Achilles tears and a throwing shoulder injury. As far as I know, he's cooked until we see evidence that he's not cooked. And not like TikTok stories or Instagram reels. I'm talking about he go out there, he's playing in a live contact football game, and he drives a football with significant zip. Until I see that, I'm out. I don't care what you do with Deshaun Watson, right? So those are the in-house options. But who could the Browns bring in from the outside? What kind of quarterbacks would they look for? We'll have that conversation in just a second. But first, I got to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Hey, have you heard of the Sleeper app? It is a place where you can go to play fantasy football. It's also a place you can go to do picks. You can put your knowledge on the line, make some picks, and see who knows ball the most, and maybe even, be rewarded for your knowledge. Go on the Sleeper app, make sure you sign up using the promo code Worst Take, and you'll get 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Make sure you check out the Sleeper app. Okay, so what kind of quarterback could the Browns look for that would fit this whole Monken system? I think somebody like Anthony Richardson would be interesting to see what Todd Monken thinks of. Because again, it's kind of like the same thing with the Shador thing, right? On one hand, I can see the appeal because he wants an explosive athlete. Anthony Richardson is an undeniably explosive athlete. The Todd Monken system has traditionally required a significant amount of arm talent. And Anthony Richardson would not only be the most explosive athlete in the Browns quarterback room, he would have the best arm talent by a gigantic margin in that quarterback room. Because Shador doesn't really have great arm talent. He's not a weak-armed quarterback, but the arm talent isn't exceptional, right? And we're talking about throwing from different platforms. If you saw my breakdowns on Shador, you would know what I mean by he doesn't have arm talent. And what that means is he can't throw from different bases. He has to have a really solid base and a really consistent base in order to get all his throws off. With Anthony Richardson, like, he can get any throw off from any arm angle, which is appealing, right? Now, I don't think Anthony has really showed a great knack for improvisation so far in his career, college or pro. And again, it comes down to that guardrail question of like, what is Todd Monken okay with, what's it not? He's never been a head coach in the NFL, so we don't really have a good grasp on this. But with Anthony Richardson, it's like, hey, do you want to play a dude like that in a system that's going to allow for as much freedom as the Browns are going to allow probably with Todd Monken? Or is that somebody you want to put in a more locked down system so you can teach them football? That's the bigger question there. Now, Todd's worked with quarterbacks before. He cited quarterback development, so maybe he has something up his sleeve and he thinks he can work with somebody like an Anthony Richardson, or maybe even like a Joe Milton if he becomes available, or a Malik Willis, or one of those guys who haven't really put out a ton of tape but have a really big arm and are plus athletes, right? Like, maybe that's something that he looks for. Maybe he looks for something a little bit safer, right? Like, the name Gardner Minshew keeps coming up to me as an idea for the Browns. I don't know how behind it I would be, but it keeps coming up. So maybe something like that. There's a lot of different ways that the Browns can utilize some of the talent that's out there in free agency to go look at. But, you know, it's interesting to hear him talk. And then you look back at what he did at Georgia, where he had a 5-star recruit in JT Daniels that was available to him. And he went with undersized, little tiny Stetson Bennett. And the reason he went with undersized, little tiny Stetson Bennett was because Stetson Bennett could move, right? That is something that he cares about. He does not want a statue at quarterback, and it's going to be interesting to see how much that guides the process for the Cleveland Browns going forward. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.